All right, boys, we're live. Late but live.
Better than nothing.
All you, Pants.
Take it away, brother man.
Okay. Making sure it was working.
As far as I know, it is.
Yeah, I got it up here.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep.
There are many missing islands and places on this planet, and some of them are extremely popular. Almost everyone has heard of places like Atlantis and Shangri-La, and a few people have heard of places like the lost continent of Zealandia and the islands of Avalon. There is, however, a more lesser-known legend of an island in the North Atlantic off of the western coast of Ireland in what is now known as the Celtic Sea. Legends state that the island holds ancient knowledge protected by priests and monks that allowed them to create a super advanced civilization, or that the island itself is home to the old gods of Irish and Celtic lore. This island has been called by many names over the years, but it is most commonly known in modern times as Hy Brasil.
Welcome to the Skeptaholics Podcast, your source for all things conspiracy, true crime, unexplained, and unsolved.
We lose him?
All we ask is that you keep an open mind and always question everything.
Howdy,
Welcome
boys.
back to another episode of the Skeptaholics Podcast. We're back with more troubles, more technical difficulties, but we're here, we're live, and we're ready to bring you another episode. I am one of the hosts, Jamie. I'm here with the other host, Paul. What's up, man?
How's it going?
And producer Bill up there in the corner. What's going on, brother?
How you guys doing?
And today we are talking about the mysterious island of Hy Brasil. Pretty excited for it. This was my choice this week. Kind of obscure. A lot of people probably don't know about it, but that's why we're bringing it to you.
We're gonna start out today with do things a little bit different. We're gonna start out with a little bit of a history on Ireland itself, and kind of give you guys a background and a run up to, I guess for lack of better terms, the actual genealogy and religious beliefs and how it came to be set in the time that Hy Brasil was discovered. I'm going to take off with that. We're going to cover a bunch of different information here. It's not overbearing or anything like that. I'm going to try not to run on too much while still getting you a good portion of the information. So, the first evidence of human presence in Ireland may date back to about 12,500 years ago. The receding of the ice after the Younger Dryas cold phase around 9,700 BC heralds the beginning of the prehistoric Ireland, which includes the archaeological periods known as the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods from about 4,000 BC up to a period known as the Copper and Bronze Age from about 2300 BC, and Iron Age beginning at about 600 BC. Ireland's Bronze Age begins with the emergence of proto-historic Gaelic Ireland in the second millennium BC and ends with the arrival of Celtic culture by Central Europe. By the late 4th century AD, Christianity had begun to gradually subsume or replace the earlier Celtic polytheism. By the end of the 6th century, it had introduced writing along with predominantly monastic Celtic Christian church, profoundly altering Irish society. Viking raids and settlement from the late 8th century AD resulted in extensive cultural interchange as well as innovation in military and transportation technology. Many of Ireland's towns were founded at this time, as Viking trading posts.
Now recording.
Now Craig decides to show up. Thanks, Craig.
To hell with Craig, honestly, at this point.
Get him out of here.
We're going to send Craig off to Hy Brasil and probably never see him again.
So now that we have him here, for any of you who are wondering what this little blue box is who are watching, that is what we're going to be using to record this so that we can get it up on Apple, Google, so forth and so on. So we're sorry about his intrusion, but this furry little bastard has been pissing me off for the last 15 minutes. And now that he's finally here, we're going to leave him there. So anyway, by the late
We're not
first...
fans of Craig right now.
No, we're not. Not huge fans of Craig at all. Viking raids and settlement from the late 8th century AD resulted in extensive cultural interchange as well as innovation in military and transport technology. Many of Ireland's towns were founded at this time as Viking trading posts and coinage made its first appearance. Viking penetration was limited and concentrated along coasts and rivers and ceased to be a major threat to Gaelic culture after 1014. The Norman invasion in 1169 resulted again in partial conquest of the island and marked the beginning of more than 800 years of English political and military involvement in Ireland. Initially successful, Norman gains were rolled back over centuries as Gaelic resurgent re-established Gaelic cultural preeminence over most of the country, apart from the walled towns in the area around Dublin, known as the Pale. The Stone Age to Bronze Age. What is known as pre-Christian Ireland comes from references in Roman writings, Irish poetry, and myth and archaeology. While some possible Paleolithic tools have been found, none of the finds are convincing of the Paleolithic settlement in Ireland. However, a bare bone found in Alice and Gwendolyn Cave, County Clare, in 1903 may push back dates for the earliest human settlement of Ireland to 10,500 BC. The bone shows clear signs of cut marks with stone tools and has been radiocarbon dated to 12,500 years ago. It is possible that humans crossed a land bridge during the warm period that lasted between 14,700 and 12,700 years ago, towards the end of the last ice age, and allowed the rehabilitation of northern Europe. A sudden return to freezing conditions known as the Younger Dryas Cold Phase, which lasted from 10,900 BC to 9,700 BC, may have developed or depopulated Ireland. During the Younger Dryas, sea levels continued to rise, and no ice-free land bridge between Great Britain and Ireland ever returned. The earliest confirmed inhabitants of Ireland were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who arrived sometime around 7,900 BC. While some authors take the view that a land bridge connected Ireland to Great Britain and still existed at that time, more recent studies indicate that Ireland was separated from Britain by 14,000 BC, when the climate was still cold and local ice caps persisted in parts of the country. The people remained hunter-gatherers until about 4000 BC. It is argued this is when the first signs of agriculture started to show, leading to the establishment of a Neolithic culture, characterized by appearances of pottery, polished stone tools, rectangular wooden houses, megalithic tombs, and domesticated sheep and cattle. Some of these tombs, as at Knowth and Douth, are huge stone monuments, and many of them, such as Passage Tombs of Newgrange, are astronomically aligned. Four main types of Irish megalithic tombs have been identified: the domes, court cairns, passage tombs, and a wedge-shaped gallery of graves. In Leinster and Munster, individual adult males were buried in small stone structures called cists, under earthen mounds, and were accompanied by distinctive decorated pottery. This culture apparently prospered, and the island became more densely populated near the end of the Neolithic. New types of monuments developed, such as circular embanked enclosures and timber stone and post and pit circles. Moving into the Bronze Age, which came into Ireland around 2000 BC, saw the production of elaborate gold and bronze ornaments, weapons, and tools. There was a movement away from the construction of communal megalithic tombs to the burial of the dead in small stone cists or simple pits, which could be situated in cemeteries or in circular earth or stone built burial mounds, known respectively as barrows and cairns. As the period progressed, inhumation burial gave way to cremation, and by the Middle Bronze Age, remains were often placed beneath large burial urns. During the Late Bronze Age, there was an increase in stone weapons, which has been taken as evidence for greater warfare. Moving into the Iron Age, the Iron Age in Ireland began about 600 BC. The period between the start of the Iron Age and the historic period saw the gradual infiltration of small groups of Celtic-speaking people into Ireland, with items of continental Celtic being found in at least the northern part of the island by about 300 BC. The result of gradual blending of Celtic and indigenous cultures would result in the emergence of Gaelic culture by the 5th century. It is also during the 5th century that the main overkingdoms took form. Within these kingdoms, a rich culture flourished. The society of people these kingdoms was dominated by an upper class consisting of aristocratic warriors and learned people, which possibly included druids. Linguists realized from the 17th century onward, we're getting a little bit behind what we're going to talk about today, but it kind of covers all. Anyway, they realized that from the 17th century onwards that the language spoken by these people, the Gaelic language, was a branch of Celtic languages. This is usually explained as a result of the invasions by the Celts from the continent. However, other research has postulated that the culture developed gradually and continuously, and that the introduction of Celtic language and elements of Celtic culture may have been a result of cultural exchange with Celtic groups in southwest continental Europe from Neolithic to the Bronze Age. Early Christian Ireland, 400 to 800 AD. The middle centuries of the first millennium AD marked great changes in Ireland. Politically, what appears to have been prehistoric emphasis on tribal affiliation had been replaced by the 8th century by patrilineal distant dynasties ruling the island's kingdoms. Many formerly powerful kingdoms and peoples disappeared. Irish pirates struck all over the coast of western Britain in the same way that the Vikings would later attack Ireland. Some of these founded entirely new kingdoms in Pictland and, to a lesser degree, in parts of Cornwall, Wales, and Cumbria. Perhaps it was some of the later returning home as rich mercenaries, merchants, or slaves stolen from Britain or Gaul that first brought the Christian faith to Ireland. Shut up. Don't make fun of me. And fuck the both of you for laughing.
It's like ripping off a Band-Aid, dude. It sucks in the beginning, and
It
then
does.
once you get it done,
It does.
we're good. You just got to kind of set the tone a little bit. So
Whatever, it is what it is.
Because and a big part of it is too is like maybe a lot of it in the very beginning wasn't super necessary, but for like what I've come to learn is that, as it does in most parts of the world, especially in this story where you started talking about Christian Ireland,
Yeah.
plays a huge factor in
Yes.
in a lot of this legend.
Yep. So, moving forward, some early sources claim that there were missionaries active in southern Ireland long before St. Patrick. Whatever the route, and there were probably many, this new faith was to have the most profound effect on the Irish. Tradition maintains that in AD 432, St. Patrick arrived on the island and in the years that followed, worked to convert the Irish to Christianity. St. Patrick's Confession in Latin, written by him, is the earliest Irish historical document. It gives some information about the saint. On the other hand, according to Prosper of Aquitaine, a contemporary chronicler, he was sent to Ireland by the Pope in 431 AD as the first bishop to the Irish believing in Christ. which demonstrates that there were already Christians living in Ireland. Palladius seems to have worked purely as a bishop to Irish Christians in the Leinster and Meath kingdoms, while Patrick, who may have arrived as late as 461, worked first and foremost as a missionary to the pagan Irish in the more remote kingdoms in Ulster and Connacht. Irish scholars excelled in the study of Latin learning and Christian theology in the monasteries that flourished shortly thereafter. Missionaries from Ireland to England and continental Europe spread news of the flowering of learning, and scholars from other nations came to Irish monasteries. The excellence and isolation of these monasteries helped preserve Latin learning during the early Middle Ages. The period of Insul art, mainly in the fields of illuminated manuscripts, metalworking, and sculpture, flourished and produced such treasures as the Book of Kells. The plagues of the 660s and the 680s had a traumatic effect on the Irish society. The golden age of the saints was over, together with the generation of kings who could fire a saga writer's imagination. The literary tradition looks back to the reign of the sons of Aed Slain, who died in 665, as to the end of an era. The first English involvement in Ireland took place during this period. Moving on to early medieval and Viking era, 800 to 1160.
Take a breath there, Chief.
I got a
You're
breath.
right.
I'm good. The first recorded Viking raid in Irish history occurred in 795 AD when Vikings from Norway looted the island. Early Viking raids were generally fast-paced and small in scale. These early raids interrupted the golden age of Christian Irish culture and marked the beginning of 2 centuries of intermittent warfare, with waves of Viking raiders plundering monasteries and towns throughout Ireland. Most of these early raiders came from western Norway. The Vikings were expert sailors who traveled in longships, and by the early 840s had begun to establish settlements along the Irish coast and to spend the winter months there. The longships were technologically advanced, allowing them to travel faster through the narrow rivers. Vikings founded settlements in several places, most famously in Dublin. Most of the settlements were near the water, allowing the Vikings to trade using their longships. Written accounts from this time, early to mid 840s, show that the Vikings were moving further inland to attack, often using rivers, and then retreating to their coastal headquarters. In 852, the Vikings landed in Dublin Bay and established a fortress. Dublin became the center for the trade of many goods, especially slaves. Bringing back new ideas and motivations, they began settling more permanently. In the 10th century, an earthen bank was constructed around the city, with a second larger bank built outside that in the 11th century. On the interior of the town, an extensive series of defenses have been excavated at Fishamble Street, Dublin. The site featured 9 waterfronts, including 2 possible flood banks and 2 positive defensive embankments during the Viking Age. The second wave of Vikings made stations at winter bases called long ports, serve as control centers to exert a more localized force on the island through raiding. In 902, a lot of Ireland had, and I'm just saying a lot of Ireland here because there's a whole lot of Gaelic names that I am not good with at all.
Please don't try.
I'm not
honestly.
going to. Anyway,
I did the best to type in how they sounded phonetically on mine, and if sometimes it was a really bad one, I just put their first name.
yeah. So in 902, much of Ireland joined forces against Dublin, and the heathens were driven from Ireland, i.e., from the fortress. That they were allowed by the Saxons to settle in England, but would, however, later return to retake Dublin. The Vikings never achieved total domination of Ireland, often fighting for and against various Irish kings. The High King of Ireland defeated the Vikings at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, which began the decline of Viking power in Ireland. But the towns which Vikings had founded continued to flourish, and trade became an important part of the Irish economy, thus allowing Viking heritage and beliefs to become a strong part of their system as well. That's where I'm going to end it and let Pants take over.
All right. Like I said before, it was like ripping off a Band-Aid. First part sucks. Now we're in for a ride. So now that we made it up to basically the legend itself, kind of set the tone. You can see there was, there's Viking influences, there's Christian influences, there's just pagan influence. I mean, there's all kind of influences, as you'll see. Because this is an urban legend, all I really have is eyewitness accounts and stories for you guys today. So you'll see in those eyewitnesses accounts and stories, you'll kind of see the different influences coming in from all over the map. I mean, we're talking aliens, we're talking monks and wizards, and I mean, it's some cool stuff. So, and if you guys got any questions, meaning producer Bill and Paul, just stop me anytime. Throw it in or whatever. So first discovered, and I use the word discovered really lightly because it's kind of the first time it was put onto a nautical map. As with any urban legend, by the time it's put down to paper, it's probably been passed around for a long time already. So I say discovered lightly, but first discovered in the year 1325 AD. This island, known to us now as a phantom island, it's just kind of a definition that the internet uses to describe an island that disappears. It was first drawn on a nautical map by a semi-famous Italian cartographer, Angelo Dalser, and was given the name Brasil with a C instead of an S. And another note, I didn't put this in here, but it's called Hy Brasil or just Brazil. It's spelled the same way as the country, but from my knowledge and what I could find, it really has nothing to do with each other. The only thing is that I think Paul mentioned something about like the High King of Kings or something like that, or the High King of Ireland. His name was I believe it's a derivative of his name, so it's basically supposed to mean like the Island of Kings kind of thing. Is
Now, I had read in the little bit of research that I had done on it, just so I wouldn't be a complete potato on the subject when we covered it, that initially, initially the founders of said island that is no longer there, allegedly, had thought that they had hit the coast of Brazil in South America when they found it. So that was a large portion of the naming as well.
it's possible. I never found that in the stuff I've listened to, but it's definitely possible. I mean, I guess the only thing I'd have to say about that is back then, Brazil wasn't a country, so unless they were still, maybe they were still naming it after that king.
Could be.
And then it was just the first land that they found,
possibly. Well, and like you said too, there's so much information out there. It's hard to really localize a good source for any of this. So it could have been,
especially on urban legends.
Yes.
Yeah, you're dealing with mythology and urban legends, of course. There's going to be all sorts of different info here and there.
Yes.
Things are going to get out of control, trust me.
And whether or not anything is factual or not, I just thought it was interesting to mention that they had set sail looking for what is known as Brazil, and that's where the country Brazil's name came from, is the urban legend behind that in itself.
Definitely possibility. We can add it to the legend.
Hey,
we can start putting that on the internet. So then when somebody else reports on this, they'll be like, where'd you get that information from? Like, I don't know. Some clowns on a podcast I found.
That's it.
Moving on. So it was named on the map. It was named. And actually, when I say this, I have the names from the nautical maps, and I actually found a lot of conflicting information about, like, one was named A and one was named B, and then another website would say, though this one was named A and this one was named B. But I mean, it's all kind of relative, I guess. I mean, you get it.
Yeah.
It's kind of been the same name or a similar name over the years. But this one was Brasil, Bracile. It appeared on another map by a Venetian cartographer by the name of Andrea Bianco in 1436, and he labeled it as Insula de Brasil, meaning the island of Brazil. And it appeared to be attached to what is believed to currently be the Azores, which are due west of Portugal, which I had no fucking clue what the Azores were. I'd never heard of them before. Apparently, it's a pretty big deal, and apparently, I actually know somebody that used to live there and just never knew it. But they're kind of a small island off the western coast of Brazil, Portugal. Sorry, not Brazil. Small island. There's like a U.S. Air Force base there and stuff like that. But anyways, on a Catalan, I believe. It's just a way of saying a native of Catalonia in Spain. It's like a county in Spain, basically, or a state. On a Catalan chart in 1480, there are two islands that are named Ilha de Brasil. One is south of Greenland and one is southwest of Ireland. So it's kind of conflicting there, but they both have the same exact names. But you got to remember, this is 800 years ago, basically.
Yeah.
So they don't have GPS. They don't have compasses. I mean, they're just like leaving port, counting and being like, it's probably 500 miles. I don't know. And then just writing on a map. And this is what we're going off of today. So, so in 1480, there were two islands, one south of Greenland, one south of Ireland. After that time, though, the island regularly appeared on maps lying southwest of Ireland's Galway Bay until about the year 1865. And Galway Bay is kind of like in the middle of Ireland on the western coast. And it's kind of like almost straight east, just a little bit south of there is where it's pretty much being depicted. Besides being on paper, though, or on a map, I should say, the first time we really hear about the island on paper is in the 8th century Irish narrative, The Voyage of Bran, I'm going to say. He had a last name. I just kind of cut it out because I had no idea how to say it.
We're not even going to try.
No, not even going to try. It had weird, like, what's that thing above the letter? It looks like a little mustache or whatever. Anyway, yeah, sure. The story is similar. It's like the Irish version of Homer's The Odyssey. You know, it's kind of the Irish version of that, so to speak. But Bran refers to an island that he found that's held up by pillars of gold. There's no disease and no conflict, and only music and joy. And I just want to say, wouldn't that be awesome in 2020 to have a place like that to go to?
The Great Escape.
So I'm all for finding that. The island is believed by Bran to be in the other world, is kind of the best translation I could find. When he actually set out you can read this story. You can buy it on Amazon and stuff. No free ads. But he kind of set out looking for the other world, and kind of what I could kind of imagine or understand from that is they were kind of looking for like another plane of existence, kind of implying that Hy Brasil is not on this plane of existence, is kind of how it was played out. That's one of the theories. Another of the stories that are told of the legendary island comes from the famous Irish saint, Saint Brendan the Navigator. He was one of the original 12 apostles of Ireland. And the story goes that one day, as Saint Brendan was serving as the head of a monastery in Ireland, again, I believe they had a name for that monastery and glazing right over it. A wandering monk came by and told him of an island that he had found when sailing west. The monk said that he and his men had been on the island for just over 2 weeks and never got tired or hungry. They came across an old man that told them the island had been there since the beginning of creation, and then told them they needed to leave immediately. So the guy was like, yeah, pretty cool. Get off my property. St. Brendan then took 14 people with him to try and find this island. And while out on the seas, they ended up getting lost and trapped in this extremely dense fog. And through the fog, they happened across a landmass they then landed at. When they came ashore, there was a dog waiting for them. I don't know, man. This is just a story. The dog led them up the island to an enormous and beautiful great hall in which a feast was prepared that was so large they feasted for days on end. Eventually, they departed the island and made it back to Ireland. And upon arrival, St. Brendan decided to call this place that they feasted at the Island of the Paradise of the Saints. And this is kind of where that Christian influence comes in. His thought was a little bit different than Braun's in that it wasn't necessarily of the other world or of a different plane of existence. It was just that you had to be holy or like a saint in order to see and go on the island. That was his theory. There's also a little kind of excerpt in here that there's a myth or a urban legend that he actually found an island and they called it St. Brendan's Island. And it's kind of believed that this Hy Brasil is maybe that same island. So after a while, the tales of Hy Brasil took on more of a uniformity, and you'll kind of see that as we go. Obviously those last two stories were kind of completely different. One person thought, yeah, I'm traveling to a different plane of existence, and the next person thought, no, you just have to be blessed by God to see it.
Yeah.
But you'll see they take on more of a uniformity, and that the island was like pretty much always encased in fog, always in the same general area of the Celtic Sea, and that it's every time somebody finds it, it's basically always paradise on earth with no sickness, immortality, and like all the riches you can imagine. It's kind of like, I kind of picture it like Ireland's El Dorado, if you will.
Or Eden.
Yeah, which could be, maybe that's all just the same. Maybe it's different names for the same place.
Yeah.
So the island, it's kind of a odd. It's kind of what makes it a legend, I guess. The island itself is always described as like perfectly circular, like, I mean, perfect, which is for a landmass is odd, right? And it's also described as being bisected by a large channel of water. I couldn't find anything that like says specifically how big the island is, in acreage or anything like that. But I'm assuming it's a good sized island, maybe a few square miles is kind of what I'm getting from the stories. So it's bisected by a channel of water, and it's covered in trees, hills, and some reports actually said that there's mountains on it. And part of the legend, which doesn't really come up in a lot of stories, but I guess part of the legend just is that always surrounded by a thick fog. It's said it's only visible one day out of 7 years. I don't really know where that came from, but that's just kind of the consensus on the lore that's told.
Interesting.
But there's usually one of two things that always happen during a sighting of Hy Brasil in most of the stories that you'll see. Either when you start heading towards the island, you never actually get any closer, no matter how fast you go or how hard you try. Or when you get close enough to be able to see the trees, the mountains, and the channel in the middle, you're enveloped by a dense fog and the island disappears. So it's kind of a vanishing act, if you will.
Now, I don't know if you covered this at all or not, but the little bit that I looked into it, there was actually a lot of lore that played into that one day every 7 years. Did you get into that at all?
I didn't find a whole lot. I basically was just finding like eyewitness accounts and stuff.
Okay.
So
what I had found, the lore stated that one day every 7 years, men from the local coastal towns and villages all had alternating duties. They would be awakened by a knock on their door. They would have to go down, get into ships, and they rowed these ships. Rowed, not rode like a horse. Rowing like a rowboat. They rowed these ships out to the island, and they carried the souls of the dead to the island. Every man who gave count of doing this had stated that while they were on the ship, they were constantly surrounded by disembodied voices. They would get out to the island. They would see a man standing there, kind of like how the Bible depicts the gates into heaven. You have one man standing there. Do you know why you're here? Do you know what your name is? And as the spirit was answering, it was accounted that the spirit would disappear and their voice could no longer be heard. And it basically, in all accounts that I found, it was the island of the dead.
Well, that's funny that you say that because when you guys were both describing it, I was thinking, oh, that sounds like heaven. No disease, no
Yeah.
sick,
Sure.
money,
Yep.
Yeah.
perfect
100%.
life. Yeah, it just sounds like okay. Well, this is what heaven is.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Which is cool because like all the, I mean, before we started this podcast, I don't think either of you had heard of Hy Brasil before.
No.
That was
had not,
kind of like
no.
my thing, but I've never heard that what you just said, and like that just adds to it for me.
Well, and the cool
Yeah, it
thing
just
was
makes it,
is the men who were tasked with rowing these ships out were seamen by trade, so they knew the waters and they knew that they were never able to find this island other than that one day. And like I said, they took
Sure.
turns doing it. The ships were
Yeah.
provided by whoever was tasking them to take these disembodied souls out there. It was never their own ships. They always rode somebody else's. Nobody knows where they all came from. The ships would just appear on the shore. The boats would always leave by a certain time and return by a certain time. And every account that I read from anybody, lore of people doing this, stated that when they returned to the island, they had a year's worth of wealth and glorification for their deed. So,
that was what we would call in modern day hazard pay.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that would perfectly lend itself to, you know, the whole 1 day every 7 years thing.
Yep.
Well, it also
sure.
kind of answered a question for me where I was wondering why, if you can only, only holy people or whatever can get there, how would anybody know about it? Where did this come from if it only appears so often? And I mean, that's just kind of
Yeah.
Sure.
ties into that a little bit.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
here you have just typical, at that time, middle class villagers that were tasked with doing this. So,
Yeah. Hazard pay, baby. So let's head back to the year 1480. Long time ago. About 2 years before my mother was born, I believe. In which a man by the name of John J. Jr. of Bristol,
Yikes.
England, departed on the sea, being the first person to really be contracted to specifically find the island of Hy Brasil. It seems like a lot of people had looked for it before then, but at this point, he's the first person on record to have been actually set out on a contract to find me this island. I want these riches. I want this fountain of youth or immortality or whatever it is. Find me this. He and his crew were out at sea for 2 months, and they found absolutely nothing. There were 2 more expeditions in 1481 by John J. Jr. as well. One being the ship named the Trinity, and one being the ship named the George. Both of these expeditions also came back empty-handed. And that's really all we hear about John J. Jr. I guess the only reason he's even in history is because he was the first person contracted to do so. But he came up empty, like a lot of people do, and that kind of adds to the lore of it. In the late 15th century, because there's like a little bit of a discrepancy here. It's somewhere between like 1495 and 1498 is from what I could find. Italian explorer Giovanni Caboto, that's his given name. That's his government name that he was born with. However, he goes by John Cabot. I don't really know why, other than he was an Italian explorer that was working for the English government, the English monarchy. So I'm guessing he kind of had to have an English name. So I'll just call him John Cabot from here out, because that's kind of what, when you find it online, that's kind of what his name is always listed as.
Okay.
He became engulfed with the idea of being the one to find the legendary island of Hy Brasil and to claim it for his patron, King Henry VIII. Every year, he would set out on the typical 15th to 17th century voyage of trying to find the new world in the West and the trade route to Asia. You know, we're talking Magellan, we're talking Christopher Columbus, you know, he's kind of doing the same thing. And in 1497, John and his crew actually landed in Newfoundland, Canada, way up on the East Coast. It was marked the first time that was known that Europeans had been to North America since Leif Erikson in the North in the 11th century. But what he was not telling the king, however, is that on each one of these trips, he was spending a significant amount of time not looking for the trade route to Asia, but actually looking for the island of Hy Brasil. And he was kind of using the king's money to fund that. As far as I could tell, the king didn't actually know that's what he part of the reason why he was agreeing to go out. And I guess he was just kind of hoping it would be a surprise. I found a crazy island.
Well, I mean, that's not uncommon for a lot of the guys that were doing that sort of thing back in the day. They say even Columbus had ulterior motives for his adventures. When he landed on Plymouth Rock, he wasn't finding what he was searching for.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
especially back then, because you couldn't just like text somebody and be like, "Hey, yo, where you at?"
Yeah.
You know,
there
was
if
put a letter in a bottle and throw it in the water, and maybe 6 months later you'd get it.
No, if memory serves me correct, there was a lot of seabearing lore that was being sought out around that time that a lot of these guys were looking for to make their claim to fame, basically.
Oh yeah, if you go on Google and just type in like disappearing islands or something, I mean there's a laundry list of basically islands very similar to this and Atlantis and Avalon, and it's kind of, I mean you're venturing out onto the sea for the first time and it's so vast, you know. Yep. And you can't take pictures and you can't, you know, Snapchat, and you can't, there's not a lot of verification. So, I mean, people could really make up anything, I guess. They could see something off in the distance and just, all you have is their word, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they could even get, while they're traveling, like you said, you can't drop your location, save your coordinates, you know? So they could see something, think they're coming back to it, and, oh, it's gone, you know? So
they could be hundreds of miles in the wrong direction.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? I mean, they were pretty good at navigating back then, but I mean, could you imagine if they actually had like a compass? So on these trips, Cabot never actually claims himself in record that he found the island, but there is some evidence suggesting that he may have, or that John Jay Jr. actually have. And that evidence is that following a voyage in 1497, there is, and I believe Spain has this letter in one of their museums. There's a letter that's sent from a man named Pedro de Ayala. He's a Spanish diplomat to England. And the letter is sent from him to the Catholic monarchs of Spain that John Cabot had found, and he had been told by the other explorers from Bristol that they found the island, and that he, meaning John Cabot, also found the same land as they had. So it kind of implies that at least one of the expeditions from Bristol had actually found the mysterious island. But that's really all it says. There is one line after it that also states, and I quote, "Last year, proof was brought they found the land." Now that's pretty vague. I mean, you take it in context, they could be really talking about anything. It does not say what the proof actually is, just that there was proof and that it was deemed acceptable to the monarchy. So whatever they were looking for, they found it. Nearly 2 centuries later, a sea captain from Scotland by the name of John Nisbet claimed to have spotted Hy Brasil on his voyage from France to Ireland in the year 1674. So basically, from what I can find, for 200 years, there wasn't really much going on when it comes to Hy Brasil. Either it wasn't being reported, or people weren't looking for it, or people just weren't finding it, weren't stumbling across it. So he's taking a trip from France and all the way around to Ireland, and suddenly his ship becomes encapsulated in dense fog, losing all sense of direction. The fog then lifts, and they all of a sudden arrived on shore of a landmass. At this time, he's kind of thinking, well, this is kind of odd. We shouldn't be here already, but we're going to go see what's going on. The legend claims that he sent a party of 4 to the shore, where they spent the entire day on the island. They claimed the island was inhabited by extremely large black rabbits. I don't know what they mean by extremely large, but They said extremely large. They must have been pretty damn big. But wait, it gets weirder. And a mysterious wizard that lived in a giant stone castle.
Okay.
It's hypothesized by some that for this wizard to be the renowned Scottish wizard Michael Scott. That's no reference to The Office. That's just his name. But honestly, I was kind of reading into him, and if I had typed that stuff in here, I mean, we'd be here till next Sunday. It could be another episode in itself, but I mean, the guy was basically like, think Aleister Crowley, but like 600 years, 700 years earlier.
Okay.
So the wizard, they actually talked to this wizard, and the wizard explained to him that he had cast a spell upon the island to hide it from human eyes. But that spell had been momentarily broken. It doesn't specify why, but apparently the spell had been lifted just in time for them to find it. He sent them on their way with gold and silver, and they headed back to Ireland. And it's actually a fact that upon returning back from his journey, Nisbet and his crew did have a significant amount more gold than they had left France with. It doesn't say where he got it, other than they say they got it from the wizard on Hy Brasil. But apparently, when they landed in Ireland, they were extremely wealthy, way wealthier than they were or should have been. So it came from somewhere along the way. A follow-up expedition was championed by a Captain Alexander Johnson, who claimed to have found Hy Brasil and confirmed all of Nisbet's findings, from the Black Rabbit to the wizard to, I mean, the whole 9 yards. Don't know if he paid him off to say it or what, but he apparently confirmed it. At this point, after heated debate from many in 1865, Hy Brasil's taken off of most, I say common nautical charts, but I actually kind of screwed that up. They were taken off of British nautical charts, which I guess you could say are common because they were the British Empire at the time. But it was taken off of there because people weren't actually finding it. They weren't bringing real proof back. So they decided to take Hy Brasil off of all their nautical charts. But just because it was taken off the charts does not mean it was removed from lore. In 1872, there was another claim of the island by Robert O'Flaherty and T.J. Westrup. They claimed to have visited the island on 3 previous occasions and were so enthralled by it that they decided they needed to bring their families there to see it in person. Once at the island, all the family witnessed the island appear out of nowhere and then disappear all the same from the boat, I guess. And it doesn't, from what I gather, they didn't actually go on the island, but they watched it from the boat. And with their own eyes, they watched the island appear and disappear. In 1878, an entire village actually reported seeing the island. The village of Ballycotton in County Cork, Ireland, reported seeing an island appear out of nowhere just off the coast. They could see it from land, and it was so close and so clear to them, they could make out the forests and valleys on the island. As many of them had boats, it was a fishing city, a fishing port. They tried to roll it to the island, and the island ended up disappearing right before their eyes as they approached. The only thing about that one is that if you actually look at a map, that town is actually on the southeastern side of Ireland. So it kind of disputes the location of where Hy Brasil's normally seen. But I mean,
Yeah,
an
because
island pops up.
all other accounts were west or southwest, weren't they?
Yes. Yep. All of them were always to the west.
So was that the only one then? The only one that we know of?
Only one I could find that wasn't from the west. And this was 1878. They didn't say it was Hy Brasil. It's just, it was a island that appeared out of nowhere off the coast of Ireland. So it's kind of just hypothesized that it was. Maybe in theory it moves. Maybe it's an alien ship and it floats around. I don't know. Even to this day, fishermen and travelers off the western coast of Ireland still claim that they see the island of Hy Brasil. And while anyone that has been around fishermen, commercial or even just the weekend warriors like myself, knows how fish tales go, but there is one more credible sighting to talk about. I say credible because it's an urban legend. The latest credible sighting, and possibly the only time that Hy Brasil's actually been written down in a report, except for the letter from Spanish diplomat Pedro de Ayala. It was from the year 2012. So just
really?
8 years ago. Yeah, just 8 years ago. So in the year 2012, a pilot by the name of Nigel Gosseur, sounds French. I couldn't see if he was like a military pilot or what he was doing, but he reported seeing a random bank of fog rolling over the Celtic Sea at around 1 p.m. in an otherwise crystal clear conditions. He reported that as he flew over the area, his compass and electronics went haywire, and when he looked down, he could see rolling green hills where there should have been absolutely no land. As quick as he saw the hills, the fog got thicker, obstructing his view of the land below, and he continued to fly straight towards Ireland. And within a few minutes, the fog dissipated, leaving him with an unobstructed view of blue-green ocean once again. Even when he looked behind him, the fog wasn't there. There was no island there, nothing. Now, I say it's credible because in theory, pilots are supposed to be pretty level-headed. I mean, to get your pilot's license, you kind of can't be just a psycho, but
Yeah.
I mean, the guy could have been on something, who knows? But the fact that it was from 2012 kind of was interesting to me.
Yeah.
So,
You know, and off of that account, it kind of sounds like a lot of the reports around this are very similar to a lot of the mysterious triangles that we have laid out across the globe. You have
Bermuda.
the Bermuda Triangle, the Great Lakes Triangle. I think there's one over by Asia somewhere. There's numerous different mysterious triangles where a lot of the same is reported. You know, you take counts of the Bermuda Triangle. A lot of the people who have made it out of there say that they were in a tunnel of fog and cloud, and it completely engulfed the plane or the ship or anything like that. But it all kind of plays into the same kind of tale. So
yeah. Well, that last account is about the most perfect example of what they call electronic fog as I've ever heard. You know, I mean, especially in 2012, things run pretty well, especially electronically, and planes and stuff like that. They're pretty advanced.
Yep.
So, to fly through the fog and have it just go ballistic is, I mean, there's something happened. I don't know what it is. I don't really understand electronic fog a whole lot, but it's not normal.
no,
Electronic fog don't roll through the town and shut off all your electronics at your house. So,
Yeah, right.
So, you guys have some theories about what you think, or I have a few of the modern theories. I can roll through them quick, and then
hit
if
us.
you want, we can
Yeah,
kind of
lay 'em
come
on
in
me.
after that. Okay, so a few of the modern theories about the island of Hy Brasil is the probably the most realistic one is that the island actually did exist at one time and was lost to either a cataclysmic event or the rising of the water levels around the world, and it's now buried beneath the waves. There's actually a spot approximately 125 miles off the western coast of Ireland that's known as the Porcupine Bank. It's just kind of a shelf. It's part of the Irish Shelf that comes up, and I think the highest point of it says here the highest point of the bank sits about 650 feet below the water. And so it's theorized that thousands of years ago, that was actually above the water before the glaciers started melting and whatever. It's just called the Porcupine Bank because the ship that found it was like the HMS Porcupine. It has nothing to do with like how it's shaped or anything. So that's probably the most plausible theory. I mean, I'm not going to get into global warming, but I mean, the water levels have risen. It's a fact. I mean, you can't deny that. Whether the reasoning is so, they're thinking that maybe that's what it is, because it would be right in the right area. About 120 miles off the coast, and it's like right where the Celtic Sea becomes the Atlantic Ocean. So it's kind of like could have been like almost like a sandbar at one time, like a barrier. And it seems like it would work. Another theory that is very plausible is that Hy Brasil was actually a misidentification, and it was confused with an island called Baffin Island. It's a remote island off the coast of northern Canada. This is theorized because as the years went by and cartographers became more accurate with their map making skills, the island continually moved west. Like if you take that first map from 1300s, you take maps from the 14, 15, 16, 1700s, you'll see, if you look at them, every time a new map is drawn, Hy Brasil is moved a little bit farther west. on the map. And so
Okay.
it's been extrapolated that if the map stayed the course and how the island moved, currently it would be drawn in the general area of Baffin Island. And the other kind of point to that is that in some of the earlier maps, Hy Brasil was drawn in with some other islands. Like I said, that one had it drawn in with what they believe is the Azores. And the Baffin Island is actually part of the Arctic archipelago, and it's a group of like 80 islands by themselves. So plausible there.
Here's my question with that. How would Baffin Island line up with the description of Hy Brasil, though?
Don't know. That's just the theory. In that I know absolutely nothing about Baffin Island.
Okay, we'll try to get some pictures pulled up when we're done.
This theory here is it's pretty cool actually. I had never heard of it until I listened to some things about some of the theories as to what Hy Brasil was. But this theory is that people they think Hy Brasil is actually just an optical illusion. It's proven there's this rare phenomenon called the Fata Morgana, which is when warm air sits upon a layer of cold air and essentially acts as a giant refracting lens that sends a series of inverted images that can dramatically distort the appearance of a distant object. Basically sounds like it's like a mirage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So here's the thing about Fata Morganas. Fata Morganas are known to look incredibly realistic and also known to change and fade in a moment's notice, making it an entirely plausible explanation for the sightings. Seems like that, and apparently they can be seen miles and miles and miles and miles away from what they're actually reflecting because of the traveling and speed of light and whatnot.
A little fun fact about that, that's actually a really common occurrence in different countries' navies, and they also believe that might have led into the RMS Titanic not being saved in time because the ship that was responding was experiencing that same phenomenon.
Definitely could be.
Yeah, see, and I go a whole different route. Just based off the information presented tonight, I'm starting to think it's just a lack of instruments. People head out to sea, they get caught in a storm, or they think they see something, and then like, okay, we got to come back to that. Well, with the lack of instruments, they try to come back, right? Then word of mouth follows. Oh shit, there's a mysterious island out there. Someone else tries, they see something, some other landmass, and try to come back to it to prove it, and it's gone because they can't find their way fucking around.
Yeah.
But with that phenomenon that you're talking about, you can probably Google it, but I've heard of different accounts where U.S. military naval ships have actually fired upon other ships that they thought they were seeing within a controlled safe zone.
Yeah.
And there was nothing there. They never got any hits, nothing.
Right.
So
I have one more theory here for you guys.
Hit me with it.
And hang on here. I see a diesel dude in the comments kind of says, yeah, thinking it's a big old mirage. It seems kind of that's what Bill's thinking. And it seems maybe like, Paul, you're kind of on board with that.
Not necessarily.
Really?
I was just stating that I know that phenomenon is very common.
Okay. So I have one more story, one more theory, but I kind of just want to I want it to be like at the end. I want us to get everything else out, everything else we think about it, and then I'll go into that story, and then I guess we could then discuss that a little bit. But it kind of would throw a wrench in the whole mirage theory.
Yeah, because in all honesty, with my belief in the paranormal and everything, I'm not discounting that it's not. Obviously, it's very, very far off the wall, but I can't discount that it's not, an island of the dead, like I had stated earlier. Not just because I read that and that's what I'm going to believe. I've taken a lot into account. About the second most legitimate explanation for me would be the one you just talked about with the islands I don't remember the name of the island offhand,
The
but it moving across the
misidentification.
misidentification theory.
Mhm.
That would be about the second most legitimate for me, but we have in our unexplained world a history of things like this. Things that
Yeah.
appear, things that disappear, and it's unexplained. Nobody may ever solve it. Nobody could ever come up with an explanation for it, but I guess for me to actually buy into that before we wrap up the podcast tonight, I think I'd like to pull up pictures, not just for us but for chat too, to be
Mhm.
able to see and compare, the accounts of what Hy Brasil looks like, the perfect circle with the channel going through it to this other
Mhm.
island, and see how throughout the course of different map drawings it's moved and so forth and so on. But I mean, a good part of me wants it to be just the fable that it is, that it's the island of the dead.
Well, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like anything when you're younger, or even in this day and age, with the age that I am, I want all that stuff to be real.
Oh, hell yeah.
I want wizards and dragons and ghosts. I mean, all that stuff. It's cool because it kind of takes you away from
Reality.
the
Reality.
grind.
Yeah.
You're grinding every day, working, providing for your families, taking care of your families, whatever you're doing. We kind of, at least for me, and I'm a lot of people that get into conspiracy theories and urban legends and stuff. It's how we get away. It's our version of
Yep.
reading fables as a kid.
Yep.
And of course we want them to be real.
Oh,
How
and
cool would that be? How cool would that be to go to this island and talk to a fucking wizard that can like cast spells and shit? And like all of a sudden, as a parting gift, he's like, "Ahoy, mate! Take fucking $8 billion in gold." Like
I don't
sign
buy
me
it.
up.
I don't buy
Yeah,
into
here's
the-
a life-size black rabbit for you. It's
Yeah.
fun.
Right. Yeah.
I
Here's a
don't.
life-size
English.
black rabbit, size 17 foot.
Yeah.
Here, take him home.
I don't necessarily buy into
And all the gold you can carry.
I don't necessarily buy into the wizardry part, but like I said, the tale
Sure.
that I told that I had found, that seems more plausible. Especially, I mean, you look at a lot of the other occult magic and everything that was going on at that time, and lore of all of the different underground scenes and everything else. It's just, I think for me it's the coolest, so that's the one that kind of pulls me closest to it.
Sure.
But
Bill?
Yeah,
You're-
no,
you're-
and I mean, as he said, I mean, we all got our own thing, right? So like, I tend to just try to think, yeah, it's just an instrument issue, But my second most would be the plotting issue on the map, like you were saying.
Okay.
Just on a logical standpoint, I try to take away the lore in my mind. I'm trying to think, okay, well, let's see, what could have actually happened in this time period.
I love that we have at least have one logical person, because I'm irrational. I'm irrational and Paul's worse. So it's awesome to have somebody be like, all right, guys,
reel
you
it in
realize
a
how
little bit.
ridiculous that sounds, right? Like, come on.
Well, Island of the Dead. I mean,
Yeah,
okay.
right.
No.
Yeah. Life-size black rabbits. Like, come on.
But that's the whole point of the podcast, is it not? That's why we're skeptical about
Exactly.
something, and we talk about all
Yep.
angles. Drugs.
All right.
It's all drugs, says your mom.
Well, I mean, could be whatever drugs they've got. I'd be fine finding out on that island too. I don't even need the gold.
Share the wealth. I think I'm rich. It's fine.
You see large black rabbits hopping down the street, like, oh shit.
I mean, that does sound like a
Donnie
serious case of
Darko.
LSD or shrooms to me.
Donnie Darko in real life.
All right, boys.
Hit us with the
You ready
next theory.
You ready for the last theory / story?
Hit us.
This is the craziest one for me, anyways. For some of you out there that are big into outer space and shit, maybe you're like, yeah, that's what I was saying the whole time. But I'm gonna call bullshit because you didn't put it in the comments.
You and I talked earlier, and this is the one that I'm absolutely cock stiff about, and you know damn well that this is
All right.
this is gonna take the lead for me. This is gonna be the one that I go with.
I'm excited. I'm excited. My hands are sweating. I'm excited for you guys to hear this.
All right, spit it out. Spit it out. Here we go.
To me, it's crazy. Okay, so sometime between December 26th and December 28th
Hold up.
in the year 9.
Oh, come on.
I do want to mention that we have talked about covering this as a completely separate subject
Yes.
too. So
Yep,
Bill,
I'm just gonna lightly brush over the connection, basically.
Yep, we're gonna lightly touch on it, and in the future, we will have a full-on podcast on this subject because I'm excited about it.
And so, if the little clip that you get of this incident interests you, leave it in the comments.
Yep.
Leave in the comments. Let us know. Hey, we want to hear this now, and maybe we'll do it next week.
Maybe.
You gotta talk to Bill though, because it's his turn to pick.
Uh-oh.
So, between December 26th and December 28th in the year 1980, near Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, there was a series of events that were reported as possible UFO landings. Bear with me here. I can feel myself losing people. These events happened just outside RAF Woodbridge, which is a British Air Force base. But at the time, it was being used by the United States Air Force. At least a dozen, because the reports kind of vary, but at least a dozen USAF personnel, including Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander. So, I mean, not just some peon. I mean, this guy's been there, done it. You know, he's obviously he's a man that I feel like you should trust. I mean, you should trust his instincts and what he says.
Yeah.
They reported seeing these unidentified flying objects over these few days. On one of the incidents, Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, he's from Wisconsin, by the way, so Midwest, stand up,
There you go.
claims to have touched one of these crafts and telepathically received 16 pages of binary code into his mind. He wrote the code down the next day and kept it as evidence. There's evidence of a cover-up in this whole story, but like I said, we're not going to get into that because it would take all day. But he kept it basically to cover his own ass. When the show Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, you know, we're talking that Giorgio, whatever, Greek guy with big hair, aliens, bro.
I can take my hat off right now if you want a visual representation of what that looks like. Just say the word.
So that's the show, that Ancient Alien show. I don't know when they started filming, but it's sometime in 2010. They wanted to do an episode on the incidents around Rendlesham Forest. And they interviewed a bunch of people that were there. They interviewed the lieutenant colonel, everything. And they interviewed Staff Sergeant Peniston for the episode. And when they went to interview him, he remembered the binary code that he had saved all these years. He remembered it and he went, oh shit, let me go grab it. And as the show went, they thought, awesome, you know, it's new material. It's something that nobody's heard before. Great. When he found that paper, they actually had professional binary code expert Joe Luciano. You can look him up. He's a legit guy. He's actually a binary code expert, which if you don't know what binary code is, that's like the computer code that uses ones and zeros. And it means like some of it means certain letters and blah, blah. I mean, the average person doesn't have a damn idea what any of that means. So apparently this guy knows what he's talking about. He translated that binary code. And in that translation were a lot of interesting things, some of them being coordinates of places you may have heard of before. There was coordinates, and we're talking longitude and latitude coordinates. I mean, we're talking accurate and the whole 9 yards. Coordinates pointing to, I'm going to butcher this, Carisol, Belize, which is a large Mayan archaeological site at one time believed to be larger than the current Belize city, the largest metropolitan area in Belize. There's also coordinates pointing to Sedona, Arizona, which is a famous place for its UFO sightings. There's coordinates pointing to the Great Pyramids in Giza. No explanation needed there. I mean, you should know what the Great Pyramids are. But there's a lot of like alien stuff there, you know, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's another episode. Coordinates pointing to the Nazca lines in Peru, which is another episode that we should probably do. Basically, they're like 1,000-year-old hieroglyphs made in the sand in the Nazca Desert. They're believed to coincide with hieroglyphs in Egypt because they're dated from around the same time and they look the same. However, there's really no tangible proof that either of the civilizations ever crossed paths. So it's like, how did it get there?
Yeah, how?
Coordinates pointing to Taishan, China, which is a sacred Taoist mountain in the Shandong province, big on spiritual and aliens and stuff. Shandong. You laugh at this, but when you said semen earlier, nobody laughed.
Hey, I
almost lost it.
I almost lost it. All right, I was holding back.
Also, coordinates pointing to Portara at the Temple of Apollo, Greece, which is a giant marble gate. I mean, we're talking, I looked it up, we're talking, I don't know, it's like 15, 20 feet tall. It's huge. And it literally looks like somebody built a portal to somewhere and just like put it in the middle of Greece. It's the only remaining part of the unfinished Temple of Apollo from 530 BC. And at 2 separate times in the code, coordinates came up for an area off the western coast of Ireland in the open ocean of what is believed to be the location of the mythical island of Hy Brasil. The code also ends with the words origin year 8100.
What?
Yeah.
Wait a second.
I feel like we're gonna get a heater from Bill right now. This is gonna be awesome.
The build up.
I am here for this.
So this futuristic fucking island is just teleporting back in time, and now we have binary code proof of it. Okay, all right. That's
Well,
maybe.
hold on, because I'm.
So
Go ahead, Bill, because I'm gonna floor you after that.
No, that's really all I had to say. Holy shitballs.
Pam?
well, I think more of the theory is not that it's the island is teleporting. More of the theory is that it's an alien hideout or base or something like that. That would explain like the cloaking abilities and stuff like that, and that all these coordinates are pointing to things associated with ancient astronauts, and
Wait,
the fact
so-
that Hy Brasil is also on the list.
Let me make sure I heard you right. You said that it was dated with the year 8100?
Yeah.
Not BC?
Nope.
It doesn't state BC, so that would lead you to believe the future. But
Yeah.
we're also, my pick is coming up, and I'm really excited to cover this. So I don't know if I'm going to pick it this next time. So in 2 weeks, I don't know if we're going to cover this or not, or if I might store this one for a later date. If you know anything about the Anunnaki have a huge influence in ancient astronaut theory and everything else. What if that 8100 is BC and not AD? What if it's not futuristic, but what if those coordinates were pulled by
Could be.
extraterrestrial beings that have been coming here for millions of years already? I don't know how
Something
much
to
you
think about.
know about the Anunnaki, but when we do go and cover that episode, which maybe I will pick that to cover in 2 weeks since it's so prominent to this episode, and the episode that we're doing next that you picked, I'm thinking that it's basically a BC, not AD.
Could be. Either way, all those coordinates, right? We're talking ancient aliens. We're talking what's believed to be like take the Nazca lines, right? They're literally you can maybe that's a picture you can pull up too. When you look at it from the top, they literally look
Let me
like
go
Egyptian
see what I
hieroglyphs,
can do.
right? They literally look like Egyptian hieroglyphs. And if those in Peru were believed to be made at the same time as the ones in Egypt, but they never crossed paths, somewhere somebody brought that information. And then, like I said, then the theory is that if Hy Brasil or a mysterious open ocean location off the western coast of Ireland, almost exactly where Hy Brasil is believed to be, is on that list too.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
it really makes you think about it.
So
I mean-
I've got photos ready of the Nazca lions.
Bill's still like, you guys are idiots. It was a
No,
it was a cartography error.
I was gonna go down a rabbit hole here with you about the the new equator and how all the pyramids align perfectly around the world in
Hey,
different civilizations.
we do
So,
have that down to cover as a future episode. So
Would you say that it's a black rabbit hole?
ooh, ooh, ooh.
all right,
Big
boys.
6 foot tall, 17 size shoe rabbit hole.
I'm gonna throw
Yes.
some pictures up here. They're gonna lose our stream, but I'm
That's
gonna
all right. They don't
throw
want to see us anymore anyway.
some pictures up here of the Nazca lines.
My mom also said that she's not going to sleep tonight after that last part. So.
Oh, look at there's a camel spider.
Yeah, there's. I mean, these are weird. Don't get me wrong. That looks
Monkey.
kind of like a monkey. You know, we're gonna get a lot of reoccurring pictures here, but
And how they, from what I could gather, is how they theorize that these are made is these people, and they're from like I said, 1,000-year difference between 500 BC and 500 AD, or BCE and B, whatever the hell they call it now. It's theorized that people made these by like trampling the dirt. They like walked in lines and like made these, like stamped the dirt down so that it leaves like almost like a shadow kind of looking thing with like different colored, it's like if you pank down dirt, it kind of gets dark. It looks like it's darker because it's more compressed and everything.
yeah.
That's theorized on how they made those.
Hmm.
In the middle of the desert. I mean, there's no even like evidence of like towns that used to be there or anything like that. It's like they just walked up to the middle of the desert and decided to make these symbols.
The world
2,000
is their
years ago.
canvas.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull up. What was the name of that other island?
Baffin Island. Baffin.
So I'm gonna pull up images of that, but I'm also gonna pull up before we get to that, I'm gonna pull up Hy Brasil.
Bill, I feel like there's just a gold mine waiting to just like come out of you. You look like you're up to no good, and I'm just waiting for you to hit me with it.
No, I'm just gathering,
doing recon.
Yeah, just kind of formulate my own opinion here.
So here is an image showing where Brazil would be off of the coast of Ireland on some of the original map work.
Okay.
And then I will quit boring you with my Google searches, but here is a rough draft. It's just a picture of what the island itself would look like. It kind of doesn't even really look perfectly circular. It looks like a set of lungs, in all honesty. For any of you who are watching that may be hunters or work in nursing field or medical field in any kind of way, to be
Or sociopathic,
yeah,
serial killers.
yes,
those guys too.
We're an all-inclusive podcast.
We include everybody.
But that's basically what the island of Hy Brasil looks like. You look here is the channel that we were talking about going through the center of it, and the separation of the two with the dense forests and the mountain range. So it's kind of cool, but when you go back and you look at Baffin Island on a map, Baffin Island itself doesn't actually look anything like what the depiction of Hy Brasil is. And that, for me, right there, would discount that theory altogether.
Yeah, but you're also talking about modern maps versus hand-drawn maps.
True.
That is true.
Like go back to the Hy Brasil map one.
Let's see. So there you have another image of it in comparison with.
Yeah, we'll go back because look they have a little channel, right? Did you see that? Go back to the Baffin Island one you were just showing. See how the zoomed in part of it has that little channel, that inlet?
The Fisher Bay there,
Yeah.
or
Or
Cumberland.
Cumberland Sound.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box here.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But for me, the thing that differentiates between the two, when you look at a larger scale map of it like this,
Yeah.
is how much great land mass is around it. Where the counts of Hy Brasil talk about basically a circular island with a channel separating the two halves, surrounded by other islands. Yeah, there's a lot of other islands
Totally.
around here. I mean, I don't know if my cursor is showing up or not,
It is.
but this one right here that I'm hovering over would almost account for Hy Brasil. Or any of these down here, if they had a channel running through them. But because there's so much landmass around it, I'm not. It'd be really hard for me to.
Stay on that photo really quick. Stay on that photo. Go back up. Show the whole thing. Look,
Okay.
it's just like every other landmass over time, either through tectonic plate shift has spread apart or squished together. So looking at that, that's just one big puzzle piece of where it could all be squished back together.
Yeah,
So that being said, I don't think it's it,
I don't
because
either.
that just looks like one landmass that split apart.
Yep. Which could be argued about all of the continents in theory, because we're
Going
gonna.
back to Pangea.
Oh, well, that's just it. We do have Pangea on the list of things to cover, and if you look at all of the continents as a whole, Pangea could be argued the same way. You know, as far as Hy Brasil goes itself, and with it being located where it is, the information that Pants gave earlier, I am kind of more so in favor that it was there. It was always there. As much as I want it to be the fabled fairy tale that I ranted about earlier, like you
Right.
said, with tectonic plates shifting.
Mhm.
And I mean, our Earth is scarred, and we'll get more into that in some other episodes, because it's going to cover probably 3 or 4 different episodes. Our Earth is scarred from a major event, and a lot of it has to do with the West Coast and the Pacific Ocean, but the Atlantic Ocean, we see a lot of the same things. And I think that it did just disappear over time through geographical changes.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, just look at Zealandia.
Yeah.
They believe they found an entire continent lost to the ocean
Yep.
like 2 million years ago. So I mean,
See,
if a
I'm
continent can get
completely
lost,
unaware of that.
oh well, we'll have to look into it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like just off the coast of Australia, that over that way. There's apparently an entire what they believe was a continent that was above water at one time, and about 2 million years ago, the the ocean sucked it in. So if in theory the ocean can swallow an entire continent, I mean,
Why
who's
can't
to
it
say
take an island?
who's to say it can't take a few acre big island?
Well, and that's just it for me too. Is if it's on an Atlantic shelf in the separation between the Atlantic Ocean and the Irish Sea, like you described it, I mean, if it's on the edge of that shelf and that land gives way by way of tectonic shift, earthquake, anything like that, erosion over time, maybe it undercut itself, it just slides into the ocean and it's forgot about.
For sure. So, boys, last thoughts. What do you think? What do you think Hy Brasil is, Paul? Final choice.
Final choice, I have to go with what I just stated. It's something that was
Okay.
there and lost over time.
I'm on the fence. I still kind of think, oh, it could be a,
Rocksteady.
Yikes.
At this point,
Yikes.
I'm taking off my fucking hat, and I'm gonna be that dude from Ancient Aliens, and it's just gonna explode up here because I can't make up my mind.
Please do, because that's where I'm at. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a big aliens guy. I don't. It's not a thing that I enjoy. But aliens, bro.
How did-
Aliens.
How did I go to being the one with sound logic and reasoning in this argument all of a sudden?
No, I definitely, my final answer is that it was a lack of instruments in the time period.
Okay.
And
I almost
now
I
it's
almost
moved
got
on
you
through
though.
folklore, throughout
Yeah.
the generations and centuries
Mhm.
since, and that's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Damn.
But I like the fucking
I almost got you.
I
almost got you.
I like the binary code. That's still lingering right
And
here.
you can side note, you can actually go find this code online. There's a link you can go to. You can see the original, not the original because it's on paper, but you can pull up the original 16 pages of binary code and you can translate it yourself if you want to.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh yeah, there's binary code. It's online. You just Google it. Just Google Rendlesham Forest, Jim Peniston, binary
So-
code.
Diesel Dude brings up a good point. He says if it was an island that was created or used by the Anunnaki, do you think that they would protect it from erosion or water level rising, or would they just like move their shit to another place? So if it were to be that case, in my general opinion, I think it would be like a if you buy into like the Bermuda Triangle and the other triangles around the world being portals or so forth for alien spacecraft to use for fast dimensional travel. I think that they would have some sort of cloaking device for the island that it doesn't actually it didn't actually get swallowed up by the ocean, that they just use that cloaking device to hide it.
Yep, that's what I think. That's right where I was going to go with that.
It's there, it's always there, it's always going to be there, but because we're not that advanced of a being, we don't have a way to be able to visualize it unless they allow us to, basically, I guess, in a nutshell.
Alex Jones probably is though.
Yes.
We should send him over there. We should put him and Joe and Elon Musk on a boat with all the weed they can smoke and see if they can find this place. Because if they can't, nobody else can.
Well, speaking of, did we tell our community about our next week's guest, Alex Jones?
Yikes.
Oh God.
Don't even go there.
Could you imagine?
Oh man. All right, guys, I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of retarded. Like, I would lose it. That would be the pinnacle of my life if we had Alex Jones on the podcast.
He's throwing the frog's gay.
Yeah.
Alex Jones and Joe Rogan here next week, and we are going to be doing a live stream with them on MDMA.
I can tell you for a fact we
Or DMT.
cannot afford
DMT.
Joe Rogan.
No, we can't.
We might be able to afford Alex Jones. He's kind of not doing so well these days. But Joe Rogan, we cannot afford.
DMT.
I don't know
DMT,
if
they're in. Guaranteed.
I
DMT on the table, they're in.
I don't know that we could afford the DMT for Joe Rogan to show up.
No. I don't make that much in a year.
I'm fucking real.
He probably needs, like, we're talking industrial quantities here.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
So, does anybody watching right now have a theory based on what they talked
Yeah.
about tonight here?
Speak up. Let
Yep.
us hear your comments too.
Anything other than one we suggested, or just any of them that you agree with, or if you just think it's the maps were screwed up or it was misidentified?
Apparently, Rocksteady 1029 knows the guy for DMT.
Yikes.
I'm not. I don't know who Rocksteady is, but I think we need to be friends. This
That's
guy's
my buddy Derek.
That
This
is
guy's awesome.
one thing I know. I'm not going down that because I will come out more fucked up and questioning more things than I already do. I
Or will
already
it straight? Will it have the opposite effect and straighten you out?
No, it won't.
Well,
I
only
think
one
we-
way to find out.
I think
Next
we
week
should
on the
try.
Skeptaholics podcast, we're all going to be doing this live on DMT.
No, we aren't. I did not sign up for this.
My wife says that the sighting from 2012 is what's throwing her off, which
Okay.
could be. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not that people today are any more trustworthy or less trustworthy, but it's just, especially because it's the day and age that we live in, it's a lot easier to believe somebody that 8 years ago was flying a plane and saw it than some clown that had syphilis, floating around the earth didn't know where he was half the time and just did whatever, like basically a pirate. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe
In
them
a
guys,
sailboat.
Yeah.
Go where the winds take
you gotta have like, if you have 5 screws, you gotta have 4 of them loose to even do that shit to begin with anyways. I mean, I don't even go on cruise ships.
No, you couldn't pay me to get on a boat in the water.
Diesel Dude says, I totally think it's just some ancient alien parking spot / testing facility that they don't want us to find.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, fair enough.
I mean, and like I said, I don't discount that because of my belief in that shit. But the one for me that is looking at it with sound mind and logic, which I probably have never had in my life.
It's 2020.
This year sucks. At this point, like, man, what else can go wrong?
Yes, logically, I have to state that I think it's something that just disappeared over time. I want to believe my other top 2. They're tied for second place between the Island of the Dead and fucking aliens, but the logic it's overriding me here. And I got to put that for my number 1, and I mean, I'm right there with you for my number 2, but, and like I said, too, we cover the Anunnaki in an upcoming episode for our viewers who are back every week. This is only our 2nd week doing it, but I mean, we've been holding strong, steady at right around 6-7 viewers, which is about what we held at last time.
Right now we have 11.
Yeah.
We've been at 11 for a while there, Chief.
Yeah.
Have we? Because I saw it dip back down again there to 8, I thought, a few minutes ago. But, for those of you who do come back and follow this through, you'll start seeing how a lot of what we cover over time is going to tie in together. And you can go back, find this episode on YouTube and saying, hey, wait, we talked about this, I remember it, and go back and pull more information that we might not cover from there. So,
totally.
For sure.
Either
way, we appreciate it. We appreciate you guys watching.
Yeah,
appreciate the comments. Honestly, I mean, we got an extra 15-20 minutes out of it because people started commenting, so that's cool. I mean, honestly.
Well, and that's the other thing too. We want to try to push for right around 2 hours every week. Obviously, we're not going to hit that every week. I don't think this week we're going to. Unless you guys
I'd rather went over last week. We almost went over.
Yeah, last week we did. We went over. We hit 2 hours and 35 minutes, I think.
Well, and there's no proof of that, so.
No, because fucking Twitch had to go and change their settings on me. But we got it set this week. We'll be able to have the VOD up on YouTube. But definitely, we're going forward. If we can get Craig lit. I mean, that little furry bastard's pissing me off, but it might be time to look at investing in an actual audio capture device for this thing. But we're gonna be on more platforms here shortly. We're gonna be, midweek we'll have the podcast up on the podcast streaming services. We've looked today at what we have for availabilities, and we're going to be a lot of places, hopefully. So,
well, don't forget, we have the TikTok. We have the Facebook page.
Yep.
Do we have an Instagram yet?
We don't have an Instagram. We've got TikTok. Pans knows what the TikTok is because he set that up. We've got Twitter. It's at Skeptaholics for Twitter because I set that up and I actually tweeted out about 15 minutes before we went live. Tweet on the page, and it was created 2 weeks ago. Facebook, you can find us by searching the Skeptaholics Podcast or at Skeptaholics Podcast. Trying to think.
TikTok is the same, at Skeptaholics Podcast, all one word.
Perfect.
I don't have any videos are not on there yet, but we'll get after it. Don't worry.
And
we'll have Paul doing some half naked TikTok dances.
I don't know about that. I still got to go back and stitch that or duet that one that you told me I wouldn't do.
Derek says, look into getting a MySpace for us oldies.
Derek will be our top friend on there. Don't worry. We'll put him at number 1. We can have you used to be able to embed the music player on your page or whatever too. We can have just like clips of Alex Jones just saying different random shit.
And in all honesty, I know we want this to be an audio podcast more than anything, but me personally, getting on here with you guys and being able to interact real time with you guys is one of the biggest joys for me, because it gives you guys an opportunity to play into the podcast too. Well, that's your mom put, hey, can we just put the 4th of July videos, Paul's nice outfit up?
Those are going to be the first Tic Tacs that we put out.
That's actually the outfit that I'm going to be wearing to duet this video that Pants wants me to duet. So
perfect.
I got to show him up.
Perfect. All right, boys.
All right.
That about wraps it up.
I think that about wraps it up. We're going to kick it. Thank you all again for tuning in. Next week, I don't think we did cover it yet, but next week we are going to be covering the mystery behind Antarctica. So there's a lot of different things that play in. There's going to be a lot of research to be done. Hope to see you guys back next week, because there's a lot of cool shit that we're going to cover.
You're definitely going to want to be here for that one.
Definitely going to want to be here. Let your friends know. Let's blow this thing up.
Tell your mom, tell your grandma, whatever.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys heard them, but you're definitely going to want to be here for this one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, guys.
Yes. Heavy stress on definitely. Absolutely. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks again.
Welcome to the Skeptaholics podcast.
Oops, wrong one.
All right, bye.
See you later.
We're up to 13 at the end there, Chief.